Where the rising ground launches the wind high into the cooler upper air, the moisture the nor'wester carries condenses into cloud. That cloud copies the shape of hills below. Individual peaks are reflected in the sky by corresponding caps of cloud called lenticulars. High above the ground, the smooth, swift wind sees the landscape from a distance. It paints the big picture with a single sweep of cloud. As the wind gets stronger, a new phase of the nor'wester starts. The tumbling air is bowled away from the mountains by the strengthening wind. It forms long bands of rolling rotor clouds above the flat terrain, an undertow of air still caught in the drag of the land. As the wind grows, it pushes the rotors before it until they coalesce to form a low sheet of ragged cloud. It sweeps away from the mountains, revealing only glimpses of the steady, white-capped waves of air above. The sheet of cloud is changing constantly as the wind continues to evolve. Eventually, the low sheet will dissipate completely to reveal another layer of cloud high above. Rebounding far above the island, it forms a single wave of air that mirrors the grand sweep of the Southern Alps. Its signature, the high cloud known as the Nor'West Arch. In springtime, the braided riverbeds are home to many nesting birds. All have to live with a nor'wester. Black-fronted terns move upriver from the coast to breed. Accomplished flyers, they ride the buffets of the nor'wester, making use of the headwind to hover as they feed on the wing. A black-billed gull treadles to flush out its prey, but keeps an eye out for a passing airborne morsel. A pied stilt, taken unawares by a sudden gust from the nor'wester, is sent stumbling in disarray along the bank. But the nor'wester is an ally in its search for food, herding the hunted insects to the lee shore of the channels. The pied stilt's long legs are ideal for wading, but it takes some fancy footwork to stand up to the nor'wester. The chicks of all birds that breed here leave the nest within a day of hatching, an important survival factor in a flood-prone river. Paradise ducks share guard duty on their young, watching over them until they fledge. The family roams their extensive territory, which is based on food supply. They defend its distant boundaries against intruders who might poach the food the chicks will need. The nor'wester makes the task much harder, as they must fight the wind as well to reach the trespassers. On these wide riverbeds, the nor'wester can gust at more than 100 kilometers per hour. The plants that clothe the riverbeds must cope with drought and floods. Hugging the ground, low-growing plants escape the wind, but not the floods that surge down from the mountain catchments. Gulls, swooping overhead, alert a nesting tern. Its instinct to defend its eggs is strong, and intruders get swift treatment. But it's powerless to protect its vulnerable island nest against the real adversary, the floods that the nor'wester sends to change the river's course that can turn island into channel in a matter of hours. Flying, the gull can make little headway now against the growing wind. In fact, it's difficult to even stand against it. Beaks into the wind, the brooding birds wait patiently, pinned to the ground by the high winds. Only the harrier rides it out, soaring effortlessly on the wind high above the riverbed under the nor'west arch. This vast wave of rising air can stretch for 1,000 kilometers along the island, mirroring the Southern Alps. For glider pilots, it's a lure they can't resist. If they can reach it, they can soar along the wave for hours, traveling enormous distances. After the glider is cast adrift, the long climb begins. Catching the updrafts on the western side of the mountains, riding them as high as they'll go. Always seeking the lift that will carry the glider up to the edge of the lee wave. The glider is a creature of the wind, the pilot at one with the nor'wester. Through the cockpit window, the arch hangs tantalizingly out of reach. Between the glider and the goal lies a frustrating barrier of calm air, between the turbulent air near the ground and the smooth, swift wind above. Today, no records will be broken. Dusk is falling, and so the glider must return to Earth. The sinking sun dyes the arch's underside with color. But the wind won't drop with sunset. Racing across the dark island, pouring clouds across the moon, the nor'wester blows on into the dawn. The first light reaches across the island to paint the highest peaks as the sun climbs the narrow gap between the horizon and the quilted clouds that night has drawn across the land. Overnight, the air has cooled, and the water it carries has condensed into this low blanket of cloud, rumpled by the wind that rushes through it. Its turbulent texture reveals the wind's high speed. But the heavy clouds hold only a false promise of relief to the thirsty land below. As the temperature rises with the sun, the blanket evaporates, and the sweeping waves the high wind forms above the east appear again. The nor'wester varies hour by hour. Out in the Tasman Sea, where it is born, conditions are changing constantly, and these changes flow on across the island with the wind. Now the wind's strength grows again, pushing the waves out from the mountains. The nor'wester sweeps the sky clear above the high country basins and piles the clouds into a towering nor'west wave 10 kilometers high. Now the cloud rests above the golden foothills that divide the high country from the Canterbury Plains,